And the reason why this is maybe attractive to attackers is that it's sort of the first line of escape. And it's also one of the hardest and the most pervasive ways of reaching the internet for legitimate purposes.
Welcome to the Talos Threat Perspective. I'm Hazel Burton. Now, after a big breach, you could ask pretty much anyone who works in security what happened this time. And one of the first answers you will hear, I guarantee, is it was DNS. It's always DNS. Now, of course, as we all know, DNS is a vital layer of the internet that keeps it running. But boy, does it take the blame when it doesn't. And then when you look at attackers possibly using it to hide or to exfiltrate data out of a network, the stakes get even higher. Now, one of the most common ways that they do that is through DNS tunneling. This is a covert channel that could be used to exfiltrate data or issue command and control instructions after they have compromised a network. In fact, DNS tunneling is one of those early warning signs that something bad is about to happen. Now, for this episode of the TTP, it's a little bit different, but I'm excited that David Rodriguez from our Talos team is here to join me. He and his team built an AI model to spot DNS tunneling. So let's get into it. First, let's dig deeper into what the attackers do during a DNS tunneling attack.
So DNS tunneling relies on the DNS protocol and is a covert way of utilizing that to exfiltrate data. And the reason why this is attractive to attackers is that it's sort of the first line of escape. And it's also one of the hardest and the most pervasive ways of reaching the internet for legitimate purposes. So most enterprise security companies are reluctant to put enforcement on that layer because then people can't access the internet. And so the risk is high, but the reward is high if you're right at the same time.
DNS, the one thing that you can't switch off, which makes it the perfect place for attackers to misbehave. In fact, this is one of those oldest rock hard place problems in cybersecurity. You have something that is way too useful to shut down, even for a moment, but too open to trust. And then there's one other question that we need to ask, which is why for so long has DNS been so traditionally hard to spot signs of malicious activity?
Anyone within a network can make a DNS request. It's almost like the global antenna network for the internet. So it's like someone trying to connect their mobile device to another mobile device. So there's no reason to stop it. And in that, these attackers use DNS protocol to hide things in these benign looking DNS names. So inside it, inside a DNS name may have maybe someone's social security number or portions of some confidential document from within a network. And so they're trying to escape both detection and they're trying to escape or exfiltrate data from within someone's network without their knowledge.
Yeah, hundreds of billions of DNS queries every day. David's one of the only people that I know that would enjoy that sentence.
It gets me excited because there's probably two aspects at Cisco that are so unique. One is that we manage a global public DNS resolver fleet, which there's very few of these around the world, and which is super exciting on the one hand, because now we're seeing 500 billion plus queries in a day. But then that means that you cannot be wrong because then people get really mad about their internet not working.
Yeah, we're not going to touch that landline too much. Moving swiftly on, let's look at what David and his team built to tackle DNS tunneling and why they took an AI led approach.
Now we see sort of a changing of the guard with agentic AI. And with that, you have not just bots, which used to be suspect to begin with, but now you have legitimate bots. You have bots sort of taking the place of someone's interaction that they would have normally been having on the internet.
I just want to say, for the record, that legitimate bots would be a great band name.
And with this nuance, it's possible that humans are not best to defend against these other bots. So we need to start to expand the horizon and our pattern recognition capacities, especially at this first line of defense at DNS. So as things are happening fast and now they're getting more complicated, we need better methods to detect it. In particular, the DNS tunneling model and exfiltration model that we're using is a convolutional neural net in the back end. It's very similar in architecture to the ResNet model, which was popularized for image recognition problems. It's actually sort of not just an AI model, but there's also a behavioral component. So DNS resolvers traditionally manage load through what's known as a caching mechanism. This allows us to sort of defend the backbone of the internet, named servers and other authorities, from DDoS attacks and redundant traffic. So we've essentially paired a sort of hybrid approach that allows us to scale our AI model to fielding traffic and also incorporating a behavioral component that's been tried and tested over the decades that have been the backbone of DNS resolvers for a long time.
So that's the science bit. But how does it show up in the real world? For example, if you are a Cisco customer.
So there's not a lot of action required on a user's part to enable this service. As people at Cisco or Umbrella in particular are familiar, they can customize policies for their DNS protection. And now this DNS tunneling is just one additional one of those categories which you can now route traffic on. And what that in effect does is it now routes your traffic at a very specific level once we've kind of determined it's eligible to then be forwarded to this caching and convolutional neural network for processing. We've regressed and performance tested this model so that people's latency and their expectations for DNS resolution are not affected. And on behalf of like the Talos organization and Umbrella, this is like a joint effort where we manage the policy of this AI model. And we've deployed it in such a way that it's very similar to a customer's policy. So as we learn and retrain this model, we effectively update the global resolver fleet as if it's just a new policy. So model weights get shipped across the world, and people get these updates without any action on their part.
So, detecting DNS tunneling to stop an attempted data exfiltration is one thing, but as I mentioned earlier, in a lot of cases, DNS tunneling is also an early warning sign, a clue that something bigger might be starting to unfold.
So typically, as attackers get persistence within a network, they had to establish it to start. And this typically happens through a DNS handshake or resolution. So as this model is able to identify and flag these, we're essentially trying to give them as early a warning to these types of ransomware or other types of malicious activity within a network.
Yeah, so if Talos's AI DNS service does detect data exfiltration, for example, as part of a ransomware attack, it automatically terminates that session and triggers a high severity alert. Now, this alert notifies the customer that immediate actions are required to isolate and eradicate that threat from the environment. So, Talos's AI DNS service is up and running in Cisco Umbrella and Cisco Secure Access. The obvious question now, what's next?
I think that this was hopefully just the tip of the iceberg. We are actively looking further into what sorts of LLMs and language models that we can train to harness the DNS language for both better resiliency of the public resolvers and also for the sort of abstracting higher concept and reasoning in the DNS resolution that would give us insight into malicious traffic at its core. So yeah, it's an exciting time to be a part of the DNS infrastructure that runs around the world, but also exciting times to augment it with AI.
DNS might never stop being the first thing that everyone blames, and maybe sometimes that's fair enough. But as this episode shows, it's also one of the smartest places to build new defenses. If you'd like to know more about Talos's AI DNS service, we have a short explainer video for it, which, if I have timed things correctly, should be popping up right about now. That is it for this episode of the Talos Threat Perspective. Please do subscribe to the Talos YouTube channel to be notified when we drop new episodes. Until next time, thank you for watching.